Your space is much neater than mine.
I clean it usually in the evenings before I quit. Otherwise, I don't want to come back to it. But I've got almost 40 years of doing the beadwork, so
Yeah.
I have gotten stuff to help me, tools to help me along the way to make it help keep it more organized.
Yeah.
Because
Sure.
I'm one that I have to have a clean space to start out in the next day, or I just don't want to do it.
I can understand that. So I heard that people call you Kiki?
Everybody calls me Keely.
Keely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So tell me about yourself.
Well, I am a mix. Everybody always asks me, well, are you Native?
Mm-hmm.
And I am a mix of Native. I have Cherokee, Blackfoot, and possibly a third that's in there we don't know. Because my family, my great-grandfathers forbid that we said anything about being Indian. I kind of went against my grandfathers, and I went to Tahlequah to find our names on the rolls. Okay. And I did find them. But I don't have a number because it was against his wishes.
What is Tahlequah?
Tahlequah is in Oklahoma, and it's the head of Cherokee Nations, where you go over there and you can go. They have a beautiful little museum. I went there for a powwow, just to go see what it's about. I'd never been before. And you can go in there, and it's really neat. Something worth visiting.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they do the dances and stuff like they used to. I know that the heat was causing a lot of problems with dancers, and they were they were talking about doing them indoors. I don't know whatever happened with that. Or that's what they were talking about when I was there anyway. The museum is just, I think it's the most adorable little museum, and in there they have the rolls of who is on and registered, has the numbers for the Cherokee.
Cherokee Nation.
And I got some answers there. And then I ended up on my journey trying to find out more about who I was. And so my journey actually led me into Canada. And I ended up on the Blackfoot Reserve there for a Sundance. And I met some really wonderful elders. And they kind of guided me on my way, answered my questions. I had some stuff going on, told them what was going on, gave me reasons why it was going on. And they told me, you're on a journey.
Wow.
And which that journey, I ended up in Idaho.
So looking around your beautiful house, obviously your heritage is important to you, and you have embraced it.
I collect. I mean, I'm drawn to stuff and I even have to display my jewelry and stuff on. I have Indian bowls that I inherited that have gone down from generations, and so I use those a lot. They're important to keep the elders there. Mm-hmm. I use those a lot to take and I notice that the jewelry that I do display on them, I do better with those at events and stuff, and they catch people's attention more than what I don't. It just seems to be, and there's times it's like I'll get away from it. It's like I need to go back and do some more pictures on there, and I got them from my great-grandfather and my grandfather, and they came off of our family ranch. The majority of them were found on our family ranch. How I started with the beading and I just became infatuated with beading. Of course, I wasn't allowed to touch them, but my mother and her mother and then my great-grandmother would all sit around and make beaded belts. Now, they weren't so much the native type beaded belts, but they did the native type stitching in them to use them, make them. But they used to do that on the weekends. We would all go to great-grandmother's house, and they would sit there and they would make beaded belts. Well, then they started buying my own beads, and I would take and make little tiny things of beads, and I would attach them to the ceiling. So when you go in my room, it was like there was beads everywhere. And it just went from there. And how I started getting to actually doing the beadwork itself was I did a little bit, but I didn't do a whole lot. They had these things where you could do beadwork and you could sell it. And they sent it to you. You got on with a company, and I got on with one called the San Francisco Jewelry Company. And I got my first pattern, my first beads. They were junk beads, hard to work with. And the quality of beads makes just a world of difference when you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
And so I made them, and I had to make 50 pairs. And you had to send them back. They had to be inspected, and they gave you black and silver to work with. So I made my 50 pairs, got them sent back in 2 weeks. And I was all excited to get my new pattern. And they come back, and I had a new pattern, but it was black and silver. And I set it down and said, okay, I quit. I can't do that. So I was self-taught, with all my beading. I got a little bit of guidance from my grandmother, but most of it was self-taught. And I said, I'm going out on my own. I just can't do this. So I took what I learned with what they gave me, and I took some of the patterns, and I made beadwork, and then my mom would take them. I was a single mom. My mother would take them and sell them at work, and then a friend of ours jumped on, and he took them and sold them to work, and then pretty soon I had so much work I couldn't keep up with it.
So while your grandmother and your grandmother and your great-grandmother didn't teach you, I assume that you were inspired by the fact that they were doing them.
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of went a different way. In fact, I taught my mom, and then my grandmother ended up learning the same techniques I was, and we ended up sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table, and my mom and I and grandma making earrings. And I have some of the earrings that my grandmother made and I kept. And when she passed away, I got all of her beading stuff. And I found unfinished stuff in her beading stuff. It's unfinished, but it's still grandma's hands.
Yeah.
So I keep them. I love making the earrings, and then from there, years later, I started making the barrettes, and then I had a really bad accident, and I ended up with a traumatic brain injury, and I had a hard time getting back to the beading because I just couldn't do it, my mind and my hands. And I had an elder from another tribe reach out to me and say, I know you're not doing the beadwork like you were. He goes, but you can do it. And I'm like, well, I can, but I'm really slow. And he goes, but you're not going to get any faster unless you work on it. I'm like, okay. He says, well, I have something I want you to do. And I'm like, yeah. And he says, I saw a lighter cozy you made. And I did. I'd made it for a friend. I made one, and I made it for him.
What was it?
It's a lighter cozy. So it has mine had a metal jacket that I did the beadwork around it, and I put his name. His name is Dusty. I put Dusty on it, and on the other side I put a wolf head, and I put cactuses and stuff on there. And so it's for a big lighter to go into.
Okay.
And because he'd asked me, can you make me something for a man? Well, that was the only thing I could come up with. So I only planned on making the one. And this elder had seen it because they were friends. And he says, I want you to make me one. And I'm like, but I don't know what to do. He says, you're the artist. Here's the tribal colors. Here's the clan colors. I need you to do it. And the clan paw print is a wolf. I need you to do it. Oh, wow. Okay. And I says, so I worked on it. I said, I don't know what to do with this. I called him and said, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do with it. And he says, you're the artist. Figure it out. And I kind of sit there, and at the time, it was before my husband passed away, and he says, well, he's got a point. He says, you'll figure it out. He says, just don't push yourself. So I went out and played around with it a little bit, and I come back, and I did. I drew it up. It took me about 8 hours to draw it up. I made the first one, sent it to him, said, I'm not happy with it. It's just too plain. He goes, no, that's exactly what I wanted. He says, I need to make another one. I'm like, are you kidding me? He says, no, I'm serious. He goes, I need to gift it to the clan mother. Well, that put the stress on, because now I'm making something for a clan mother, and it's to be gifted. And to me, that was, it can't even put into words how it makes you feel. That's something that's really special. You don't get asked to do that very often. And especially me not being any part of their tribe. They were from Georgia. I wasn't any part of that. And it kind of made my day, but then the stress was on, and you want to talk about just not being able to figure it out. I had to walk away. And he told me, no big hurry, I'll need it for a few months, but you've got it. And my husband kind of chuckled, and he says, he's right. He's like, you'll get it. So I come back a couple days later, and he wanted the same paw print, but different colors. It needed to be a different color for her, for the color around. And I says, well, I called him. I says, okay, I'm stuck. And I don't know what to do on the other side. He says, do the wolf. I'm like, okay. He says, I just needed you to change the colors in the paw print. Well, why didn't you tell me that? I said, here I stress on it. He says, because you need to figure out you've got it. But it didn't click. At that time, I was still really fuzzy from the brain injury. I was still healing. I was having hard times walking, so my concentration, my memory was affected. And he's like, but I made you think. And I mean, what could I say? He did. He made me think. And I credit him. He's passed now, but I credit him for me getting back into my beadwork, because after that, I did that. I just picked it up and went with it. But he needed the push. He was my inspiration. He really was my inspiration. How I met John, and I met him after I had been to Canada, and they told me I was on a journey, and they told me that Creator would put in my path who was meant to be there, that I didn't have to seek anybody out. They would be there when they were meant to be. And John was one of those that was meant to be. And just losing him, He was my confidant. I could call him and talk to him about anything and everything.
Yeah.
And I'd get frustrated doing the beadwork, and his answer would always be, "You're the artist. Figure it out. Walk away for the day. You've got it." And another thing I had to get past was I don't like errors. And the elders are like, "That's what we call a spirit bead." And I'm like, "Yeah, I understand. I know you call it a spirit bead, and other people don't notice it, but it's driving me nuts." And so one of the elders was like, "For a week, I want you to put spirit beads in your beadwork.
Just purposely
Just
one out
purposely
of place.
do it." That was hard.
Yeah.
That was really hard, and it's something I could not sell. So I gifted them. I made them and I gifted them. And they're like, "But the thing is you did it." I'm like, "Yeah, I did it." And they're like, "The spirit beads mean a lot to some people."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm one that if there's an error there, it drives me nuts because I know it's there." And they're like, "Yeah, but a spirit bead's not viewed as an error." But that's something I've never gotten past. I know, I understand it, I get it, but for me, I just can't. And a lot of people say, "How do you do those?" It's like, "Do you mind if I do it?" I don't mind. I don't mind at all.
I think that that's part of what we're building inside the community is that people are more than willing to help each other.
Yes. Yeah. To me, it's important. I mean, there's some of the shows that I've been going through since we moved up here. And even before we moved up here to other events, they would come in and say, "We have somebody else that wants to do jewelry or somebody else that wants to do beadwork. Would you mind? But if you don't want them here, it's okay. We'll say no." And it's like, I don't have a problem with it because if you bead and I bead, we can use all the same materials. We can have the same pattern. It's not going to be the same because our hands are different. Our tensions are different. And as a beader, I've been doing this for almost 40 years, but I still will run across a problem. Or there'll be a different type of stitch or a pattern that I'm working on that how did it go back? Because I'll look at a pattern. I'm not one that will take and follow when I buy the patterns. I will not follow where they tell me to start. I always pick another place because there's a better place for me to start. And so if somebody's following the pattern, theirs is going to turn out different because if you start there, the beads lay differently than if you start someplace else. And that's why I'll pick a different place. But I don't understand these vendors that get upset because, there's somebody else who's vending the same thing I am. Use it as an opportunity. Get to know them. I've made a lot of wonderful friends that way. Yeah. I like to talk to other people that bead. I like the communications of learning something from somebody else. There's always room to learn.
Absolutely. What is the weirdest thing you've been asked to make?
I've had some requests to fix items, and I couldn't make any mistakes because I get a lot of inherited beadwork from tribal members that their kids or their grandkids have inherited it and it'll be damaged or something will happen to it and I have to fix it. And if they don't have the same beads, it's hard to find the beads to do it. But you've got to be careful because the beads will break. I mean, the needles, you can't force anything. You've got to be real careful with it. That's one of my most challenging ones. I wouldn't say weird, but maybe uncomfortable because you're handling a family heirloom, an irreplaceable family heirloom. So that's one of my toughest ones, and I love the honor of being asked to work on them, but it puts me under a lot of stress because it's just special. There's and it's like, and you can kind of feel the elders there while you're working on it, and some things aren't meant to be fixed. I have had people come in and bring things to me at events and ask me to buy them and sell them that are native. And I have sent a lot of people out of my booth with things because one, I don't know where they came from. I don't know whether they've been stolen. I don't know what's behind them. I don't know what's attached to them, which is native belief. A lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people don't get that. You don't mess with native items that you shouldn't have. And there's so many artifacts that have been stolen out there. You don't mess with it.
Yeah.
And that makes me very uncomfortable. I don't even want them in my booth.
Do people bring things just to show you?
I do have a lot of people that will bring heirlooms, family heirlooms,
Mm-hmm.
to come in and show it to me. And I've had questions of how to display them and how to keep them, you know, to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell somebody a glass case or a very good high quality plastic case. The most precious thing I ever worked, and it later was destroyed in a fire, but that I ever worked on was it was a Sioux Indian. She come and said, I have, and I met her at other events. She made things and sold at events, and she says, I have a button, can't remember what she called it, but had a button in the center of it that buttoned onto their native dress for their powwows and things, or not powwows, but their sun dances. And she goes, I just have the piece that goes on the front. She says, and some of the beads have started coming loose. Can you fix them and keep them from coming unraveled? I said, I'll look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a bunch of missing beads. Now the chances of finding these beads was slim to none.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to go out to a bead shop. It was in Paso Robles, California, and I knew the bead shop owner. I lived not far away at the time. And I went in and I said, Renetta, her name was Renetta Howe. I said, Renetta, I have a problem. I need to see if I can match these beads, and you're the only one I can think of that might know what to do. And again, I believe things happen for a reason. Renetta says, funny thing. Let me go get something. She went to her back office. She had been sent a pair of earrings to fix that the person didn't package it, and they just stuck them in an envelope and threw them in the mail. And the stamp canceller had busted the earrings up. Those exact beads I needed for fixing that buttonhole was on there.
Wow.
Same exact beads. I think they were a native made bead. And so I was able to fix it and provide her with spare beads. And she had it for, I guess it was probably another 6 or 7 years, and then her farmhouse burnt down in a fire. And so it was lost in a fire.
So it sounds like you started selling right away.
But I did beading quite a while before I did it. I needed to master it because I wasn't good at it. And what I did make, I made and gave away as gifts.
Yeah.
I gifted them. I even made them and gave them to like schools and stuff for drawings and things.
Oh, cool.
And so I had a lot to learn. And also to my grandmother, who was Blackfoot, she couldn't put into words why, but she got really upset with me about selling my jewelry. Mm-hmm. And I kept asking her, why, Grandma? Why? And she says, just because. And I says, but our ancestors traded. We made jewelry and we traded. Mm-hmm. Why can't I? It's like a trade. And she says, I don't know how to tell you. She goes, but a piece of you goes into that jewelry, everything you make. You keep making it and you make lots and you get weak. I couldn't understand it. So when I ended up at the Sundance in Canada, I asked one of the elders. I said, "Can you explain something to me?" And I explained. He says, "Yeah, I can tell you." He says, "Do you call your spirit back?" I don't know what you're talking about. He says, "What your grandmother couldn't tell you is that a piece of you goes into every item that you make, and so each little piece you start depleting yourself." He says, do you ever notice that you're really tired, no matter how much sleep you get, no matter how much rest, you just don't have the energy to do anything? And yeah, I do. I'm that way now. I just get back through the day. He goes, you need to call your spirit back. Okay, I don't know how to do that. And as an elder, he says, you'll figure it out. He says, just go yourself someplace where nobody bothers you, and then sit down and talk to your spirit and tell your spirit you need to come back and that you need to be whole. And so I've learned a lot, and I know that since I have found the elders that I was getting to go see, I've lost contact now. A lot of them were older, and a lot of them have passed. Some of them have moved on, and I don't know where they're at. But I've learned a lot from them, and a lot of it is just, just a lot of spirituality is find yourself.
Yeah.
And don't take anything for granted. And also, too, is pay attention to the energy around you, because energy is a really, really big thing. Yeah. And I pay attention to it all the time with doing the beading and stuff. And it's kind of funny. I've got a TV in my bead room, and I'm a background noise person, but I do sometimes get into watching stuff and doing the beadwork.
Mm-hmm.
You do not watch anything that is going to give tension. Anything that's going to be scary, or that you're worried that something's going to happen because you pull your strings too tight.
That's really interesting.
It will cause your beadwork to be too tense, and your beadwork will want to buckle. You can't do beadwork either if you're irritated. If you're irritated, if somebody's bothered you, if you're stressed over a deadline coming up, don't do beadwork. But I have to say, I've been on, and I've done other platforms. I've got my own Square store, and with Drift Sleep, I cannot say enough. It's been so easy to use.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. I don't stress sitting and doing the doing the ads. I love that it's all handmade.
Yeah.
And right now I've got all the beadwork on there. I do simple stuff with the charms. I thought about maybe putting some of that. I started doing these because I had customer requests. A lot of my customers, they love the look at the beadwork, but they don't like that. They're just not a beadwork person. And so they started asking me, can you make things using charms? Can you do stuff with turquoises and crystals and stuff? So then I got into making these, and I do a lot of that for my events because I have a lot of the barrel racers and stuff that will come in, and that's what they want. So now I have a mixture of everything other than just beadwork. And so when I get to where I'm done with the beadwork, or I'm frustrated with beadwork, then I'll go, and it's just the bending the wire and putting the beads on, and I'm got all kinds of conchos and stuff I can play with.